Allied strength is 155,000 troops. The Axis strength is 380,000 troops. The year is 1944. German forces had expanded over the majority of mainland Europe. Many countries had faced the might of the Nazi military only to surrender or ally themselves with Germany. The Nazis had moved throughout Europe unchecked for nearly 5 years. It was time for the Allies to liberate Europe. The Allied plan to create a large-scale presence in northwestern Europe was codenamed Operation Overlord. But first, they had to deal with the large seawall Adolf Hitler had set in place to repel invasions. The Atlantic Wall was a linking of fortresses, bunkers, reinforced concrete pillboxes, landing craft obstructions, and millions of mines. Hitler placed Field Marshal Erwin Rommel in charge of German forces and fortifications at the wall. After planning and training for months, Allied forces were ready to go over, around, and through that wall. The initial step was Operation Neptune, an amphibious landing and establishment of a beachhead. Allied Expeditionary Force Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower chose June 5th as D-Day, the date for Operation Neptune to occur. Midnight, June 5th. The beaches at Normandy were broken into 5 separate locations codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword. In order for the beach landings to have the greatest chance of success, the German positions were softened up by massive bombardment from both planes and ships. In addition to the bombardment, over 24,000 paratroopers from the United States, Britain, and Canada were dropped behind enemy lines to destroy or capture strategic bridges, roads, and causeways in order to keep the German positions from receiving reinforcements. 0630, June 6th. The initial landing force of Allied troops was split into 2 groups, those attacking both Utah and Omaha beaches under the command of American Army Lieutenant General Omar Bradley, and those attacking Gold, Juno, and Sword beaches under the command of British Army Lieutenant General Sir Miles Dempsey. At Utah Beach, the Allied forces were swept further south of their intended target because of strong currents. The first wave of troops was responsible for clearing mines and obstacles and creating gaps in the wall so that the subsequent waves of combat troops could enter and take the beach. The more southern location was actually a benefit for the soldiers. After landing over 21,000 troops, there were only 197 initial casualties at Utah. At Omaha Beach, the Allied forces met with a more difficult situation. High cliffs and strong currents created additional problems for the landing. Air support was concerned about hitting the landing crafts and was unable to clear many of the obstacles that were on the beach. Omaha was the most heavily defended beach by the Nazis. The Allied invaders lost 1 soldier per square yard of territory gained. Over at Gold Beach, the Allied forces landed further inland on the beach than expected. This created a tricky situation where a lot of equipment had little room to maneuver. Additionally, the invading British units had specialized armored vehicles to clear the way. By the end of the day, the units invading at Gold had made their way 4 miles inland. At Juno Beach, the Allied forces struggled early as many of their armored vehicles became submerged and stuck underwater. Eventually, they made their way through the beach, but then ran into heavily fortified homes and streets. House-to-house fighting with significant German fortifications slowed the Allied advance. But finally, by the end of the day, the Allied forces at Juno linked with those at Gold to maintain an area of land 12 miles wide and 7 miles deep, with only an estimated 1,000 casualties each. At Sword Beach, most of the 25 tanks assigned to the landing zone made it ashore to support the infantry. However, the Germans protecting Sword relied on landmines and traps instead of massive numbers of troops, so advancing was still quite dangerous. But once the obstacles were cleared, the invaders quickly covered ground. By the end of the day, Allied casualties at Sword were under 1,000 men. The invasion at Normandy was the largest amphibious landing in history. Over 150,000 men and nearly 6,000 landing and assault craft had crossed the English Channel to bring the fighting to Hitler. The Allies had attacked and taken a hostile beach from the enemy, and established a secure location to bring in additional troops and supplies to cause the Nazis to fight a two-front war. This was the turning point in the European campaign of World War II and would shatter any hopes that Hitler had of maintaining a Nazi Europe.